Hello and welcome to the ID Talk podcast. My name is Peter Counter. I am the editor-in-chief of Fine Biometrics and Mobile ID World, and today on the podcast I am excited to share with you a conversation about AI-enhanced fraud and the innovative solutions emerging to fight it. In this episode, I interview Marianne Miller, Fraud and Cybercrime Executive Advisor and Vice President of Client Experience at Prove. Marianne and I discuss the good and the bad of generative AI when it comes to identity, starting off on deepfakes, voice clones, and upgraded high-tech versions of classic scams. We then go into the various identity solutions that can fight those threats, including biometrics and Prove's phone-based approach to anti-fraud, before Marianne shares her deep history in artificial intelligence and what you can do now to protect yourself and your organization in the contemporary fraud landscape. It's a fascinating conversation about 2024's biggest identity topic, so let's get started. Here is my conversation with Prove's Marianne Miller right here on ID Talk. Marianne Miller, Fraud and Cybercrime Executive Advisor and Vice President of Client Experience at Prove, joins me now. Marianne, thank you so much for joining me today on ID Talk.
Oh, Peter, it's great to be here, and I look forward to our dialogue.
Yeah, same here. The feeling is mutual. I always love talking to folks at Proof. One of the biggest trends as we find ourselves here at the dawn of 2024 is the rapid adoption of generative AI and machine learning tools, and those have become widely accessible in the past 12 months especially. And while that's created new opportunities for workforce automation, there's actually also a dark side to the technology that experts in our field are aware of and addressing. AI tools are empowering fraudsters. So my first question for you is, what are the new types of fraud that are emerging as a result of the increased accessibility of AI tools?
Well, Peter, this is one of the, I think, most prevalent topics right now in the industry and the circles that I talk to around fraud authentication and identity proofing. And when we think about what the concern is I think about a book that's called Manipulated, and the author is Teresa Payton. Teresa is the ex-CISO from the White House, but she's also a very renowned cybersecurity expert. It's often quoted in guests on a lot of the major media here in the U.S. and internationally. And Teresa mentioned, just take an excerpt from her book, that deepfakes are AI-generated forgeries. So we're really looking at deepfakes that are so convincing that you can't believe your eyes, kind of expression. And that's, I think, really relevant to, like you said, there's lots of good that comes out of AI, but we're also looking at, where are the concerns? And that is certainly one that I lean on Teresa a lot for her expertise. I know that, I work with some of the industry counterparts, and we've been testing actually some of these capabilities online. So there's a company called DDI, and there's 11 Labs. You also have Reface and a company called Cabana. There's others with similar quality. But every 6 months we've been trying the quality. So at the beginning it was pretty obvious that that it was something that wasn't real. But more recently, and you only have to feed these systems 1 or 2 minutes worth of video, and we've seen some dramatic improvements in both video and voice around cloning an individual. Very concerning. And so my prediction is by the end of 2024 that these are going to be pretty flawless and good enough for people who are not expecting a deep fake to really fool them.
Mm-hmm. But of course, deep fakes, very exciting technology, very frightening technology. But when we're talking about AI and fraud, it's not just these new techniques that are being used. Classic social engineering techniques are also getting a boost from these tools. Specifically, I'm wondering, how is AI being used to improve and refine existing scams like phishing and vishing? I know you mentioned voice clones. That's probably part of it.
Yeah, and yeah, you're right. That it is voice clones is definitely part of that scenario. And we think about the whole world of scams, and we know how concerning that some of these scams are when it's impersonation. And we look at, bank impersonation, the government impersonation, impersonation of businesses, individuals who work for businesses, even your impersonation of a friend or a relative, someone that you expect to call you or talk to you or leave a voicemail message for you. And then those impersonations lead into even romance scams that are occurring, crypto scams that are occurring regularly and quite dramatically. And I just talked to a victim just a few weeks ago, and she lost her whole life savings to one of these scams. And it was not someone that was naive, someone that was very educated, very much in the understood the world of fraud, and she was fooled. So we have a situation where we already have a scenario where scams are prevalent. We have regulation in the industry that the UK has really the actual watchdogs that were watching the financial services industry there have put in pretty strict regulation around banks' liability to reimburse consumers for scams. We have some of that changing in operating rules here in the US. So now we're at the point where you have liability changes that are in the favor of the consumer, of course, and the victim, but you also have the advancement of these abilities for these bad actors to, have these tools right up their sleeves to be able to conduct and take the sophistication of their attacks to the next level.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm glad that you brought it into the victim's perspective there too, because I think that there's a sort of a misconception that people who get scammed are rubes, but it's an important aspect of this to talk about how these are sophisticated fraudsters, and honestly, it's great to hear that that the liability changes are hopefully going to motivate some solutions to this to help us address this, because I know the fraud numbers going into this year are also quite frightening, just about as frightening as some of this technology.
Peter, I would like just to
Yeah.
comment a little bit more on that. I'm glad that you recognize the victim piece. I have a lot of conversations. I'm on the Federal Reserve scams definition and classification working group. And we often talk about the scams and we're working on a work product right now. And what happens is, we talk about, yes, there are individuals who are more vulnerable or, could be more vulnerable to scams, but we're really to the point, Peter, a scam can happen to any one of us.
hmm
And that's, and again, some of the AI that we're talking about will make that even more prevalent. But we really need to make sure we stay aware.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that there are folks like you people at Prove who are staying aware and also participating in these working groups. That sort of collaboration is and those collaborative efforts are really key to this. That is of course speaking of the human element, but I'm wondering, in terms of the infrastructure that we have in place, what security and identity systems are most vulnerable within this AI enhanced fraud landscape that we're talking about?
Well, I can't think of any that are not vulnerable, but I'll focus on a couple of things. We were just talking about scams and, the ability to be tricked or fooled or engineered, social engineered. The one thing that the scammers need is they need a mechanism once they scam you to move the money, to move up at either crypto or need to move US dollars or move, other currencies from one point A to point B. And that is something that where identity plays an important part in, because if fraudsters can digitally go online, go to a fintech, go to a bank, open up an account with ease, because of the fact that they have all of you and my identifying information, all of our name, our social, date of birth, and address, it's really incumbent that AI that's progressing and able to conduct these scams, it's really incumbent to be able to stop these fake accounts and these identity theft accounts, synthetic accounts from creating on platforms that enable this AI to be able to cash out quicker. So if you think about it, if the scams occurred, the money, if the victim is either been coerced, tricked, to move the money from one account to the other, or the actual bad actor moves the money, that money will move very quickly. And but they need an account. They're not going to use their own name for identity. Occasionally that happens, but usually they're not foolish enough to do that. So that's where solutions like Proof come into play, where you're looking at other attributes other than the PII data, which is important. It's important to do what I call entity resolution on that data and to confirm that data. That's important. But outside of that data, we're really to the point now where the trust of the phone, the line trustworthiness of the line type, risky line types, all of the other attributes that you would look at that are digitally available, and whether the consumer has possession of that phone, all these things that really correlate to answer the question, is Marianne Miller presenting Marianne Miller's information in the flow, or is she validating her own information in the flow? And if we start to curtail the ability for the bad actors to cash out, then it makes it much harder, even though they have come to some level of sophistication with the AI.
Mm-hmm. That's really fascinating to hear about it in that sort of like deep process way of doing it. So much of our talk about preventing about fraud is preventing it from at the attack vector, but it is really interesting about that sort of money transfer aspect. It almost is a photo negative of what we talk about for the consumer, where we're saying, oh, we want it to be frictionless to do this, and then on the other side, we want more friction for fraudsters. It gives us more time to catch them in the act.
Well, Peter, and I like, on that
Go
point,
ahead.
I really like that you've mentioned those two dynamics I call kind of the strategic challenge. And I really think that fraud prevention and detection and customer experience don't necessarily have to be mutually exclusive. That there are tools absolutely out there. Proof is one of them, but there's others as well that really help you balance that perspective. So, move that money, but move it safely. Prove that identity, but prove it safely and easily. So, I think that's something to keep in mind, because this is where you get your business and your, innovative identity proofing experts, your authentication experts around the table all together to say, well, yeah, we've got these tools, but how do we operationalize them so that the customer, feels safe or is safe, and then we also have a good customer experience.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I'm a huge fan of this, and listeners will probably kind of hear me repeating myself on this note, but I really love the idea that safety and feeling safe is part of that customer experience. Feeling like you're operating in a trustworthy environment where you won't get scammed, or that if you do get scammed, that you have a higher rate of being able to recover. That's an important part of it too. It's not just about convenience; it's about feeling that safety. So we've been talking about fraud from different angles, but I want to kind of go back to the sort of core element of it, which is that fraud is about the human element in the equation, right? That's what it is on a fundamental level, and it exploits the human elements within a digital network in the context that we're talking about. Therefore, it seems natural to me that digital identity solutions would be the best avenue for defense. You've already been talking a little bit about this, but I wonder if we can dig a little bit deeper into how biometrics and strong identity technologies can really address the emerging threat of AI boosted fraud specifically. And how does artificial intelligence support the anti-fraud solutions on this side of the equation?
Well, Peter, this is a pretty, I think we're in uncharted territory here.
Mhm.
That's what and I feel, and I'll tell you the reason. We're using biometrics, we're using, which I love. I really don't like putting my password in. And
You and me both, yeah.
I really like that kind of customer experience, but I do think that we're going to get to the point, we know with some of the, digital document verification, there's been threats, there's, also with selfie checks, with some of these other mechanisms where there's been some, I call it machine versus machine, where you've got, the actual solution on one side that is doing what it's supposed to do, and it's doing it well today, but that you also have the threat actors on the other side who understand that solution to a very, very, very good degree. So what we'll start to see is, as time goes, and back to the test and learning that we've been doing in the industry, is to watch when the bad actors really get to the point where they can bypass some of the sophistication that's in place today. And so that'll be an important moment, because we've seen this with other, we saw this with SMS OTP, when the SIM swapping started. We had to get protection to make sure that you understand if a phone's being SIM swapped or not. We saw this with credit cards and debit cards when, the magnetic strip no longer was enough. We had to, add a chip to the card to make sure that we have additional authentication. We'll start to see AI progress. We'll start to see the threats progress, and we'll have to see what we innovate with to make sure that we keep those different approaches that we have today up and running and safe.
You know, talking about this, it still has this aura of speculative fiction. I know, everybody's used a chat bot now and then. We all do have biometrics in our phones and stuff like that. But I do still feel like, in general, when we're talking to mainstream audiences, that people are still thinking of these solutions to this AI fraud as something that's coming. But the fact is, and you've already mentioned some of this already, this technology is actually available and it's ready to defend identity systems right now. So my last question for you is, what technologies, solutions, and strategies are available today for listeners that are aiming to protect themselves and their organizations from AI-based fraud? And to follow up on that, what's the first step toward deploying those solutions?
So Peter, this is a great discussion. And before I talk about today, I'll just take us back a little bit.
Sure.
Back in the late 90s, I worked for a company called H&C Software out of San Diego, and H&C developed, and it was, it was a very special team. The company developed a neural network. It was pattern recognition. It was used for credit card and debit card anomaly detection. Some of the research that was done in DARPA and military was taken, and these neural networks and this artificial intelligence was used to actually solve the problem of credit card fraud then, before we had chip and pin. So it was, we've probably all gotten that phone call to say, is this your transaction or not your transaction, over the years. And the product that H&C developed was called Falcon, and it's still in production today. And it was an exciting time to be part of this team. We all, in fact, this alumni, we're all connected to this day because what we launched globally was so exciting. But there was a group of us where we were talking and we were saying, it was so exciting in the late 90s. What happened? And, was the, we watched AI, and, and I asked one of the founders who was really involved in developing this AI, and I said, we're, one of these data science founders, and I said, at that time, how sophisticated is the AI that we're working with today? And he said, Marianne, he goes, probably Falcon is like, at this point in time, like an 8-year-old child. He said, but in your lifetime, you will see that 8-year-old child grow up. And sure enough, he was completely right. We watched this look at everything that generative AI does today. It's amazing. But what I think there's an opportunity for startups. I think there's an opportunity for companies to take the acceleration that happened and more on what I call the manufacturing side, or the business side, or the in some of the applications that you can use for business. I think applying that to risk, as far as identity fraud and authentication, there's a huge opportunity, I think. And I think that those tools that are available today, anomaly detection using AI is still available today. But I think there's a huge opportunity for accelerated innovation, accelerated research, R&D in this field.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so exciting, and that's really cool for you to bring up that idea of sort of watching AI grow up from those days. It must be like seeing your young child grow up and go off to college or something, or at least learn to talk. Right?
Yeah, and it was funny when I was celebrating New Year's Eve this year, and I said 2024. I said the future is here. We are in the future, so it's definitely fun.
Yeah, that's great.
and challenging. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, let's not forget that either. Well, Marianne, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for joining me. My last question for you is, how can listeners get in touch with you to learn more about the topics that we discussed today?
Oh, and I would welcome that very much. And you can reach me at mmiller@prove.com, and feel free to reach out anytime.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again. I hope to have you back on the show again soon.
Thank you, Peter.
And so concludes my interview with Marianne Miller, Fraud and Cybercrime Executive Advisor and Vice President of Client Experience at Prove. To learn more about the topics we discussed on this episode, visit prove.com. And for everything else in the dynamic world of identity, stay posted to findbiometrics.com and mobileidworld.com. I want to thank Marianne once again for joining me, and thank you to Logomrad, who produces our podcast theme music. I have been your host, Peter Counter. Until next time, stay secure and stay safe.